This is the Watchman giving a clarion call. And today I wanted to speak to a show-stopping headline that's just come to light, which, if true, explains a great deal about what has happened in the last several weeks in Europe. Now, this headline took me a bit by surprise at first, and I intend to speak to it, but first let's have a bit of background info here. For months, Vladimir Putin and Alexis Tsipras had been seen shaking hands, having conference calls, and signing treaties. And everyone thought that Greece would ask for financial assistance and that Moscow would give it to them in whatever capacity they wanted. After all, Russia's official position was that if Greece wanted help, all they had to do was ask, right? Well, apparently that wasn't the case, at least not in the way Syriza was expecting. You see, in this story just published, it's come out that Syriza asked Russia for $10 billion in order to help relaunch and print their own Greek drachmas in place of euros. This basically meant they were asking Russia to make an informal Grexit possible. It was the moment the Greeks had been waiting for, the ultimate opportunity to stick it to Brussels, to stick it to Merkel, to stick it to the ECB, and to stick it to globalists everywhere. But it all went down in flames in the end with no backup plan. Because, and this was the real shocker, on the night of the Greek referendum, Putin personally turned down the Greek request for the loan that it sought and opposed the return to the drachma. Yes, you heard that right. Putin personally said no to the drachma and, by extension, no to the Grexit itself, at least for now. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking right now. Well, Watchman, I thought you said Putin was a good guy. I thought you said he was different. I thought he wanted to put the EU, the US, and NATO in their place. He missed his chance, and he backstabbed Greece and betrayed them. Well, I'll admit, when you first read this headline, that's perhaps the way it comes across, but the more I think about it, the more this move actually made a great deal of sense. Now, why would Putin do this when so much was riding on Russian help? Well, let me explain what's likely going on here. Over the last 18 months, I've learned a great deal about this man, Putin, and what really makes him tick. And I believe if you want to understand the explanation for his action here, in Greece, the clues can be found by watching how he's handled the Ukrainian crisis. Now, you may be wondering, well, Watchman, what on earth does Ukraine have to do with Greece? Well, a great deal if this new story is true, because it means that the manner in which Putin has handled both of these crises is strikingly similar. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for instance, just as in this Greek situation, there are many who've watched in horror in Kiev as they've attempted to ethnically cleanse the Donbas region of Russian civilians, and they've asked, well, why hasn't Putin sent in the tanks? Why has he betrayed the Donbas? Why has he betrayed Novorossiya by not backing them? Okay, these people who've asked that can't understand Putin's decision to keep Russian military forces directly out of conflict because they don't understand what else that decision would have meant. Putin did not send in the tanks in Ukraine because he knew that stepping into Ukraine would have involved a military expedition at least as far as the Dnieper River. He knew it would have brought international condemnation upon Russia. He knew it would have brought much worse Russian sanctions than they were currently under. He knew it would have cost many billions of dollars. And he knew that it would have cost many thousands of lives. He knew it would have given some sense of moral high ground to NATO and Kiev in that conflict. And lastly, he knew it would have given DC precisely what it had been looking for in the first place, grounds for a Cold War 2.0. In other words, Putin didn't send in the tanks because there was almost nothing positive to be gained by doing so. Yet there was much to be lost from such an action. Yes, perhaps it could have saved a few lives, but then again, Perhaps not. After all, it might have given both NATO and Kiev ample excuse to step up a much larger war against Russia in Ukraine, causing even more loss of life. Besides, there's another question that kept Putin out of southeastern Ukraine. Why settle for the Donbass, or even for Novorossiya, when he could have all Ukraine as a prize? The brothers understand this right now. Putin doesn't simply want to gain the Donbass or even Novorossiya. He wants to keep all Ukraine from joining NATO. He wants to give all of a federated Ukraine the chance to fail hard on its own, because he understands that once NATO and the IMF are done failing in Ukraine, done raping Ukraine, there's a high likelihood they'll be forced to turn to Russia naturally on their own in order to rebuild their country. He wants all of Ukraine to come back to Russia, and I personally believe the chances of that happening are strong once this all plays out, if he gives them enough space to fail hard and let inertia do his work for him. All right, now apply that exact same line of thinking to this Greek situation. What would the act of giving Greece $10 billion to print drachmas and exit the EU have gained for Russia? Well, he would have likely blown a hole in the derivative market. He'd have likely dealt a killer blow to the whole EU project, and he'd have maybe shamed, upset, and humiliated Brussels and Berlin leadership, and even given the Greeks a short-term respite. But that's it. There was nothing further for Russia to gain by extending that loan and enabling the rise of a drachma and a Grexit. Now, why do I say that? Well, think about it. He's already signed the Turk Stream Treaty with Greece. He's already relaxed the food import ban for Greece. He's already got a powerful voice in Greece within the EU against further Russian sanctions. If Greece left, he'd no longer have that. If he'd funded the Grexit, he'd be cast by the banksters as the cause for the Grexit, the cause for the EU's disintegration, and perhaps even as the chief cause for the financial collapse itself. No, a $10 billion loan is a lot to pay up front for no clear improvement of the Russian strategic situation. Now, for all of you who think that Putin should have funded the Grexit and the Drachma to simply score a quick knockout punch to the EU banksters, you're not thinking big enough. You're not seeing the big picture as Putin does. Remember how Putin wanted all of Ukraine to come back to Russia? Okay, again, apply that same thinking to this Greek situation. Does Putin simply want Greece? Is that the end goal? No, brothers, no. He doesn't simply want Greece to come to him. He doesn't simply want the European Orthodox world to come to him. He doesn't simply want Central Asia to come to him. What does Putin want? He wants all of Europe to come to him because he wants a united Eurasia to come to him. That's the prize. He wants an economically welded, organically fused, cross-continental trade and military alliance to come to him. The true prize of winning the great game is greater regional autonomy and freedom for other nations. Through a multipolar world, that is the dream, yes, but Eurasia is how they get there. It is the vehicle that will take them over the rainbow. Eurasia is the only power strong enough to defeat the Anglo-Zionist globalist forces, which have laid waste to Russia for the last century, since the Communist Revolution, and the rest of the world by extension. Giving Greece the expensive go-ahead to leave right now would have been a hollow, short-lived victory, just as sending in the tanks would have been in southeastern Ukraine. Both would have achieved no clear long-term benefit for Russia or the blossoming Eurasian trade bloc. In fact, it would have had immediately negative results. What does Russia gain from not funding the drachma? Well, by saying no to the drachma for now, he endears the German elites to him. He personally pulls their chestnuts out of the blazing fire that they themselves have lit. He gives the European banking and currency system precious time, and he paves the way for a further normalization of relations between Berlin, Brussels, and Moscow. Now remember, DC will do everything in its power to keep Berlin and Moscow from the friendship that should be theirs by right. Putin wants to bring the entire structure, the power structure of Europe on board with a further integration with China, with the Eurasian Economic Union, and ultimately with all of Asia itself. This man has a vision. This man wants total victory. He can see the big picture, and he knows how and when to make a painful short-term sacrifice like Greece, in order to inflict maximum pain upon his real enemies. He knows when to sacrifice a rook to produce a checkmate. Putin is a master tactician. His goals are nuanced, yes, but in the end, incredibly simple. He's a man who knows what he wants to achieve and how he needs to get there. He knows himself, he knows Russian capabilities, and most importantly, he knows his enemy. And such a man, Sun Tzu would say, is one who is ready to win. This is the Watchman signing off. Stay vigilant and bring the fight to them.